G'day mate, you got here at just the right time. Ah, and you brought your missus. G'day Dale. Thought we might have a crack at another suck, squeeze, bang, blow episode. See if we get the old Volksy to go over here. Now this old girl, it's been sitting here for a while. I'm thinking 10-ish years since it's been running. And it was a parts car we got, but it was also mobile. When the kids were little, it was one of the cars that was driven around at the time until we robbed too many pieces off it to make it go. And I'd actually forgotten what I'd taken off it, and this morning I came down here and had a quick walk around it thinking it would still have a key in the ignition and things like that, but some Rob's been here and he's taken all the dash out of it for another project. So could be the old Hollywood hot wire and flash the wires together at the front to make it go, but we'll see how we go with that. So we'll hop into it. I slashed the grass a bit, mainly because being springtime here in Western Australia, it's time for the old snappy sticks, nope ropes and danger noodles, Joe Blakes to be out wriggling around. And given that some of our fellas are a bit nasty, it's best to sort of make sure you can see whether there's snake or lady snake roaming around your feet at the time. And yes, I have been working in my shed and I have had them crawl across the toe of my boot. So big thing is just know what they're about. They tend to leave you alone most of the time. Alright, let's see what we got. We'll give her a turn around, see if she turns as a start. Yeah, the old flat four air-cooled Beetle, and I will admit I do have a bit of a soft spot for ridiculous little air-cooled German cars. And we'll just give you a turn. Looks like she's out of gear. And we've got some compression. Yeah, it's coming up on compression there. It was running pretty reasonably, this one, but it did tend to foul the plugs up a bit with just being chugged around, so wouldn't surprise me if we've got to pull the plugs out and give them a bit of a clean. Always worthwhile just checking the oil, firstly to make sure there's some in there, but also you can tell a lot from the oil if you're sort of looking at getting something old going again and running. If you pull the dipstick out, and not applicable on this one, but if it's got a radiator and you see that the dipstick's all rusty scaly, well there's a fair chance it's got moisture in the crankcase. And something like this sitting around, you could have had moisture from something leaking into it or something like that, but it's had the engine cover on it. We're a little bit over full, so whether that's because it was just overfilled when it was filled up last time, or whether it's been over fueling and there's a bit of fuel in there, we know no one's tried to get it going. But if you have a smell of it, if it smells petrol-y, or if it's a diesel engine a bit diesel-y, you'll know that it's had fuel contamination in there. This smells pretty good. It just smells like used engine oil, and it should be slippery, and it is like that. Shouldn't have any gritty lumps or anything like that in it. But diesels, if they feel a bit slimy, it means that it's probably got the wrong grade of oil in there or something like that, and it's been getting too much carbon build up in there. But this just feels like used engine oil, so no dramas with any of that. That'll work. So we will look at how we can get this to crank. Batteries behind the seat in these, and given that somebody's nicked all the ignition switch and stuff like that, we're going to have to hot wire it somehow, which means I've got to get underneath there and get a wire onto the starter motor. And it looks a bit close to the ground for some Rob to be crawling around in there, but he might be able to reach in. So we'll see if we can get a battery in it first. Now, we don't have to check the water, doesn't have any of that. So this one, pretty certain I converted it to a ballast ignition yonks ago to make it a bit easier to start. But I might be making that up too. So I don't see the ballast resistor somewhere. I might have only thought I did it. I have done it to a few Beetles over the years. We've got a run solenoid on the carburetor just in here, and it should have, yeah, around this side we've got an electric choke. So hopefully that's all working. We'll take the air cleaner off it in a minute, just so we can get in there and put some fuel in it. Always pays to check the throttle. That's moving quite happily like that. These little Solex carbies didn't give a lot of trouble, and a bit like the Weber on the Falcon, if you had an issue it would just be a diaphragm sort of issue. These will have a vacuum pull-off. I think that's what that does. I'm not 100% certain. Someone might know more than me. But there's a diaphragm around the side there for an accelerator pump. And apart from dirty fuel and issues like that where it would just stick from something like that, they didn't really give much trouble. Okay.
So how long has this one been?
10-ish sort of years. I'm not exactly certain, but it'll be around the 10-year mark it's been sitting here. So Rob got stuck into this one and stole the dash. I was sort of hoping it might drive, and we might even achieve that. We'll see how we go. If the clutch cable's not broken and things like that, I think I put a clutch cable into this once when it was mobile. But we were building a Herbie replica, so we needed some earlier features. So some of them fell out of this car and made their way into another one. It's had the Holden Gemini seat conversion kit put in it at some stage in its life. Bit of an upgrade. And that little coupling just down there in that hole is the gear shift. So that's how they work in there. So you've got the gear stick up the front, and that just comes straight out the front of the gearbox because it's all backwards in a Volksy. Seats falling through the floor. I wouldn't be sitting on that one. Now this one I converted to 12 volt. It was a 6 volt car, 6 volt era, and it had the old original, I think it was a 1200 motor in this one, but it was very smoky, got very hard to start. And this engine and gearbox came out of the car we were building, just mainly to keep it mobile so that the young bloke could play with it in the paddock. Might have to just tighten that battery lead up too. So I've hooked the battery up. There's no sparks, there's no smells or anything like that, so we know we've got nothing touching, but we do have a heap of wires that have just been disconnected from the dash sitting up there in the engine bay. So if we're running the risk of burning something, this one could be the one, but we'll just have to be a bit wary. So if you smell something, let me know. It looks like that bolt there don't want to work. We might have to try another thing here. Now, V-dubs suffer a little bit from voltage loss issues. The battery's here, the engine's there, the wiring's got to run all the way up to the front to the key and then all the way back to the engine. And this is a pretty common thing that happened to them, was people would put an auxiliary wire through from the battery up to the front of the car to the key to bypass some of the wiring. So that's what that green wire does there. Now, this being a 6 volt car originally, converting it to 12 volt, it's only a matter of changing your starter, the generator, and all the globes. Everything else will work. If you double the voltage, you halve the current. So therefore, the wiring's working half as hard on 12 volt than what it will on 6 volt. So all your 6 volt wires are just overkill. So that's handy to remember. If you're doing something with a 6 volt car and your wiring's in good condition and you want to convert it to 12 volt, there's no need to change all the wires. What we might have to do, we want our battery terminal to be nice and tight, so I've just cut a piece of wire and I'm going to double it a little bit and we'll poke it in beside the battery terminal inside the lead, and that should make it tight on the post and we'll be able to get it going. Okay. That should make an electrical connection. Alright, what have we got up the front? Whew. Which ones will be the ones we want? That one will be a live feed for something. We should have some ignition switch ones somewhere. What happens if we... Nothing on them. Just probing around in the dark here at the moment, guys. Looks like it's going to be just as easy for us to crawl around the back and hook some wires in place. That's a battery wire, we know that. So we should have the wires for the key somewhere. You do. Well, spark there, so that one's alive. The key ones shouldn't have gone through here. Hang on. Oh, these might be promising. No. Somewhere. No, looks like we're going to have to be looking at some wires under the car and hook it up.
So what were you hoping for back then? That the engine would start?
That the engine would crank over at least and we get a little spark for the one that lit the coil up.
Right.
But somewhere in under here is the starter motor. And it's around about over there somewhere. It's having worked on them more than a few of these over the years, and being an auto electrician, or an auto electrocution sometimes, almost a few zaps and sparks. One of the things that the apprentice gets to do is to take the starter motors off the Volkswagens, because no one likes doing it. So I have been under the odd bulksy, getting starter motors out. It's not that hard once you sort of get your head around what does what and how it all works. So hopefully that's how hit the button and make it go wire. Just have to bare the end off because someone pinched the bare end to put somewhere else. This is going to be the problem with this cut grass, is losing things. Now I've just got home from a fleeting trip across Australia, people. Exactly a week ago. Good mate of mine and a regular contributor in the comments of our channel, Al Sunderland, gave me a ring at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and said, I've just bought a car in Adelaide. Do you want to come and get it? Now, we live in Western Australia, down at the very bottom, and almost as far west as you can get. Adelaide's past the middle of Australia, and sort of in the middle, but off to the other side a bit. So we did 6,000 kilometre round trip in 5 days and 4 nights, and we came back with an old Holden. And I got home on Sunday, it's Tuesday now, at around about, I think, 3:30 in the afternoon. So that was just an out of the blue trip. Now, Al rang up and said, I bought this car, do you want to come and get it? He didn't need to twist my arm, I can tell you. I spent 9 years of my life roaming backwards and forwards across Australia in a big truck, and I kind of been missing that part of the world, so it didn't take much convincing at all. So I might get the air cleaner off and get a bit more room. The voltage regulator's hiding just in the back there, and that's got the wires up to it, so we'll get in there. We should have a live wire from the battery. Now, this is an oil bath air cleaner. They're not that efficient, but they were sort of the mainstay of the industry for a long, long time. There are people out there who swore by them and reckon they're the greatest thing ever, but they're not that great. I'll show you how they work. You've got a bit of oil in the bottom there. So what actually happens is the air comes in through the edge here over this lip, and it charges down there, and then it's got to do a right angle turn and come back up through this gauze in here into this cavity in the top, which is almost like a plenum, and then it draws down here into the engine. The idea is dirt being heavier will keep flying when the air does the right angle turn and just get stuck in the oil. So it's pretty simple, and like I say, before paper elements came along, these were the be-all that ends all for the industry, but paper elements are far more efficient. And interestingly enough, here in Australia, when GMH went to the paper element, there was a percentage of people that just didn't believe they were any good, and so they brought out an accessory to put an oil bath back on the cars that had the paper elements. Now, Rob was responsible for this because it sort of drove around and was getting a bit wet. A bit of old tyre tube on there. to stop the regulator from getting drowned. We'll get in there. So that should be our live wiring from the battery just in here. So if we touch that on there, we should have a... Oh, yep. That doesn't sound too good, does it? It was starting before, so... That's what we want. Righto, before we get too carried away, we'll unhook the fuel line in, which is that one there. So we've got a little lift pump here driven off the camshaft. It's a sealed unit, this one, it doesn't come to bits. And I've got our usual fuel bottle. I've upgraded it a little bit, I'll show you what I mean. One of our, well, young son that had this car for driving around the paddock was in town the other day with one of our cars and it broke down. It's Holden Gemini and condensers seem to fail on it, and it's not the fault of the make or model or anything like that, it's the fault of ignition components these days. So all these old cars with a condenser and point ignition, you cannot buy quality stuff for them anymore because there's so few of them on the road. Even if you buy big brand name stuff, and I've had genuine Bosch stuff on it, it's all made in China. It's not a patch on the old stuff. So with Gemini we keep a supply of condensers, and every so often it just sort of dies and we've got to throw a condenser on to get it going again, and that's what happened. But from the description I was given, I thought I'll start by changing the fuel filters, because pretty safe bet the fuel filter was blocked up. Well, the fuel filters were fine, but I put new ones on them anyway. So this one not being completely blocked up, I thought, well, this will be a pretty good will it start fuel filter. We can actually recycle and use it there. Right. We've got a 5/16 or an 8mm piece of hose, and we've got a 6mm, which is around about quarter fitting on the fuel pump. But one of these little fellas, we'll screw that down there and tighten that up, and it'll work for what we want to do today. We'll have enough stuck on there. And I forgot to bring the fuel. I was getting the stuff ready earlier on and Deb wasn't down here, and I thought, well, I'll leave the fuel in the shade of the shed instead of putting it in the back of the ute, and then I forgot all about it.
And that's where it remains.
Yeah, well, I think I blame age, you know, like if I was younger I'd probably remember all this
stuff. You could blame me, I was the hold up.
Oh, yeah, no, I think you're right. Now, might as well, while we're here, we'll address a question that was thrown, well, two questions that were thrown at us by one of you viewers at home. And the first one was, why do you have so much junk? Well, that's the realisation of a childhood dream. Now, you can imagine young Rob when he was about yay big and preschool and running around a million miles an hour and full of life, and all the grown-ups of the time, and I'm sure all you grown-ups out there have done this to little kids like that, would ask me, what are you going to be when you grow up? Now, if you ask that of any kid today, you're going to get a raft of answers, from computer programmers probably to airline pilots and all the usual things like that. Well, people would ask me that question and I'd say, I want to be a junk man. So that's it, guys. Realisation of a childhood dream. I'm living the dream.
Robbie, junk man.
The other question we raised at the same time in the same comment is, what does Deb look like? Well, you might have to wait on that one. We'll see if we can surprise her later in the film. Yes, she doesn't like to be on camera much, but we might be able to trick her and catch her unawares.
Yeah, good luck. I'm also the editor.
I shall return. So we've got the whole suck, squeeze, bang, blow thing going on, guys, and I'll expand on that a little bit. If you can imagine number one cylinder with the piston in at the top, and it's about to start travelling down the bore, the intake valve is opening as the piston is moving away from it. So it's going to suck the fuel in the air down through the manifold and down into the cylinder. So the quarter of a turn of the crank is suck. The crank goes around the corner and starts pushing the mixture back up. It's going to squeeze it all up until it gets to the top. Both the valves are closed, so once you get down to the bottom, the intake valve will be closing as the piston comes to the bottom and starts changing direction. It's closed. Big squeeze up to the top. Sparks all happen, run down the wires, bang, big explosion. So that's to get that back up to the top. Both valves closed. We call that top dead centre. That's where we make our timing from, but we've also got that charge sitting there all squeezed up. So that's one revolution of the crank. Then we get the bang, and it blows the piston back down the cylinder where we get the power from. Another quarter of a turn on the crank. As that hits the bottom, the exhaust valve opens, the momentum carries it round, and then it starts pushing the spent gas back out, and it comes out the exhaust pipe. So pretty easy, suck, squeeze, bang, blow. Always got to remember that. So if we don't have that, we don't have anything. It doesn't work. So with these little lift pumps, they're a diaphragm operated pump. So there's an intake valve, which is usually just a flat disc with a little tiny hairspring underneath it, and the same thing for the exhaust valve. What happens is once they've been used and left sitting, is the little valves perish, get dry, little splits and things like that in them. So sometimes you'll get a pump that doesn't want to go again after it's been left sitting. But sometimes, and I'm hoping this time, if you get a bit of fuel past them, they'll go. So if it doesn't lift fuel straight away, sometimes they'll live again if they get a bit of moisture in there, and it just sort of gives that little disc something to seal with. So we'll grab our little bit of squirt it in the carby, we'll get some ignition power and see what we can do. Now I've got my Worth brake cleaner bottle with a bit of 2-stroke fuel in it. These are a great pump bottle. Just pump them up, off they go. This one's a brake cleaner one because they've got better seals in them, and so better bang for your buck. I've got 3 of these. One of them's just got lacquer thinner in it, the other one's got wax and grease remover in it for my paintwork, and this one's got a bit of 2-stroke fuel in it for doing this sort of stuff and getting engines going. So if we can go a little bit further on this one here, we've got a pipe poking up into the air horn at the top here, just comes out of the float bowl. That is the vent for the float bowl, but we'll expand it a little bit more. That's actually a balance tube for the float bowl. So what actually happens is, if you way back Model A era, like our old girl out here, they never had a balance tube in the carburettor because they never had an air cleaner on them. So therefore the vent to atmosphere from the float bowl was the same as the area of atmospheric pressure in the air horn. Once people started putting air cleaners on engines, they suddenly realised they were running rich. So then the vent from the float bowl got poked into the air horn behind the air cleaner, so that the pressure inside the air cleaner would be the same in the float bowl as what it was in the air horn, and therefore the carburettor was balanced again and it came back to running how it's supposed to. But when you look at a carburettor on an engine you want to get going, if you just run a bit of fuel down that vent or balance tube, you can actually fill the float bowl up and you're ready to rock and roll. So we'll put a little bit down there and we'll get some sparks happening. So we've got our ignition switch handy. Now one wire on the coil goes to the points on the distributor, which is this green wire down here, and the other one's the red wire. That also works our electric choke, and we can get power onto that. Now I had thought I'd put a ballast resistor on this, but I can't see it, so maybe I was dreaming, or maybe I've robbed it for something else. But even if it's a ballasted coil, the amount we're going to run it, it's not really going to matter. Running a ballasted coil without a ballast resistor, you will wind up just burning the points. And but it'll take a little while to do that. It'll get you home if you're stuck on the side of the road and you just need it to make your car go. We poke that in there, get that out the way, we don't need to worry about that. Oh, look at that, that's our spark. So we know the points are working. Oh, and we got a little bit of squirt from the accelerator pump. Nothing. Probably a bit too much, but that'll be all right. Righto, let's investigate. Normally, when you have that bit of a spark, when you're testing hooking the wire up, it will indicate whether or not you're actually getting an ignition circuit. Put that down there where you guys should be able to see it.
So what are we doing?
We're looking for a spark. So we'll just look between there and there when I crank him over. No spark.
Yes, there was.
Was there? Can't be much.
No, it wasn't a lot, but when you put it right close to it.
Alright, get rid of the Yeah, that's a pretty weak spark, so I'd say we've got a crook condenser. Okay.
Which surprises you not at all.
Well, don't know. We'll check how bad the points are. But just turn the key off. Okay. Now, there's a few funny things with a V-dub. Most of them don't actually have any advanced mechanism in them. So this one's one of the same. It's just a solid shaft. Some of them are vacuum advanced, some of them are not. And there's another little weird thing with them too. And I've never heard anyone other than the bloke who told me this story confirm this. So I don't know whether it's fact or fiction. But given that he made his money repairing distributors, I'd go with a fact. There's a big oil cooler that stands up inside this air cooling housing just straight through here, and the air off the fan blows over that to cool the engine oil. Now it puts a different airflow over one of the cylinders, and I can't remember which one it was on that side, but I think he said number 2, but once again it was a long time ago I was told this story. That cylinder runs a bit hotter than the other 3, so Volkswagen put a different cam on that particular cylinder so it gets a different spark to compensate for the cylinder running a bit hotter. And you can't actually see it, but it's just ground different on one spot apparently. So what we'll do is we'll give that a bit of a clean with a bit of emery tape and see if that improves it. And the man's name was Bruce Schultz. He was one of my tech school teachers, and he went back to fixing distributors after he was a tech school teacher. With a name like Schultz, you think he'd know all about ridiculous little air-cooled German cars.
Why ridiculous?
Oh, I just call them that because it's funny. Like, who builds a car with the engine in the back and the boot in the front and doesn't have a radiator, you know? It's got to be a ridiculous little air-cooled car.
You're going to upset all the people who like those little cars.
I like those little cars. I don't make no secret of the fact that I like ridiculous little air-cooled cars. We've got not a lot of spark here. Sometimes when you clean them with a bit of emery, you'll have a grain or two sitting between the points. And if you put the screwdriver in, most people will get caught like this, put the screwdriver in between the breaker arm and the shaft to lift it off the points, you've created a short circuit. So even though you're breaking the circuit through the points, your screwdriver's carrying the current across to the shaft. So you've got to just spring the, here we go, that's making a zap now. Just got to spring the points off without shorting the screwdriver out. So we'll see what we got. Oh, we've got a little bit more spark. It should run on that, I'd say. Righto, that's a bit barkier than what it was. You had a nice crack to it. You really want to hear a nice crack. Right. They will run on a weak spark if they've got good fuel. We don't have good fuel, and we put a bit of two-stroke oil in it as well, so it's less than salubrious, but you know, it's worth a try. Right, that's trying. We'll get some down the hole and a fair bit down the neck and see what she wants to say. Right. We're not sucking any fuel, hang on. Yeah, we got fuel, it's sucking fuel. Look at that. She wants to live, guys. Doesn't matter if you get a bit down there, it's going to want to burn it up. Big thing is, don't try feeding more in with the accelerator pump like that, you'll only flood it, but if you do, just crank her open and give it a heap of air. just using my hand to choke it a little bit there. I don't really recommend it because if it backfires you can get a hamburger rather well done. We're getting fuel coming out through the accelerator pump. We can hear that going. I want to poke the camera in there, we might even be able to see it. Get right in.
No, too close.
About. Yeah, I just got to look to see where we're going. So somewhere looking down the hole, the exhaust pipe's got hot. So hopefully there's a little squirt going in there. I can hear it, I know it's working. But it's starving for fuel a little bit on the main jet, but it could be a bit gummed up. It's not flooding or anything, but if we give the top of it a bit of a, sometimes the needle. So giving it a bang on the needle and seat, sometimes they're a bit gummy with a bit of gummed up fuel, and it might just be not letting enough fuel through. It's definitely not flooding, so it's not pouring fuel everywhere. We've picked fuel up, it's gone through the fuel filter. So when I had my hand over it and restricting the airflow, it was running a bit better, and that was just the same as having the choke on. Now I've adjusted the choke right off on this engine in the past, so clearly we haven't been really worried about that. But because it hasn't been running for so long, it just needs to get everything sorted and happening, and we'll give him another go. While I was squirting the extra fuel down there, that does the same job as putting the choke on. So if we can see if we can get it to sing. We might have to change the plugs in it too, they might be pretty crappy. Thought we've got an intermediate jet sort of issue, doesn't want to keep running. We may have to delve in there, but we'll see what's...
Question.
Yep.
So my leg is right here, or was right there behind the exhaust.
Yep.
The exhaust is shooting out little bits of...
Rust.
Right, okay.
Yep. So it's just where the muffler's been sitting for so long. There's rust scale on the inside of it as well as rust scale on the outside of it, and they're just getting blown out by the pressure of the exhaust. So we could also start a bit of a fire with some of this dead grass around here too, which wouldn't be good. We've closed our burning season off just the other day, so we're not allowed to have fires anymore. So if we start a fire playing silly games like this, the fire chief's going to come and have a grizzle. He's just my next door neighbour. I think I'd get away with it. Ugh. think it's time for a tune-up. I think we're down a hole, hadn't got a lot of power. So we'll pull the plugs out and have a look at them. Now, sometimes, but we're not going to be able to on this one, I can. Right, she's not running on this one here. That's the exhaust pipe coming out there, and that's cold. I can actually hold my hand on the exhaust pipe there. So if we just rip this plug out, it sounds like it's got at least 3, so it might just be that one plug that we need to get out and have a look at that. If we change it with one of the others, we might be able to get it going or something like that, or maybe find another one to put in it. Now I've got my broken socket that we had on the Falcon video. I split it down the side trying to turn the Falcon motor. So I was a bit sad about that. It was a new old stock one I bought off eBay, and I think it was the first time I used it. Yeah, I bought it purely for sentimentality. It's an old Sigchrome one made in Australia, and I thought, yeah, they're not a bad socket, I'll have that, and used it once and broke it. Now the unconditional guarantee will still apply today, but they'll only give you one made somewhere else because the Australian ones are all gone. So I think we'll just use it until it doesn't use anymore. So today I've chosen to go all Sigchrome on the Sparks plug socket front. So I've got a Sigchrome universal joint, a Sigchrome ratchet, and just in case I brought a Sigchrome extension. That was another eBay purchase, basically never been used before. Bought it and a long one beside it for the princely sum of $9. Good when you get a bargain like that. Okay, what do we got down here? Well, the plug looks clean. It's actually not a bad spark plug. It's a little bit sooty, but it's definitely not running on it. So whether one of the leads or the cap's got a problem or something like that, I don't know. Or it's got a compression issue, maybe it's got a stuck valve there, but it doesn't sound like it. With a spark plug, what we're looking for, naturally we've got a gap in there, but when they're worn out, the centre electrode is rounded. When they're new, the electrode's ground nice and square on the edges, so you've got a piece of rod coming up that's been cut off nice and flat. And it's very easy for a spark to jump from a sharp edge off the edge of there. When they're worn out, the edges are all rounded over and the spark finds it hard to jump off. So the other thing is they get fouled, you get a lot of rubbish and stuff in them. But that doesn't really look to be too fouled. So we might just see what's going on with you. So we'll try this down here and see if we can get rid of the spark. So it could have a mechanical issue.
What are we looking at?
We're looking just in there to see if we get a spark in there when we crank it over. Nothing, not a thing. So it would indicate we've got an ignition problem on that one lead. No. So do we have a spark out the wire? Yep. We've got sparks there, so it looks like that plug's crooked. So we might have to go and have a look around and see if we can find a new second-hand spark plug for the old girl. I shall return. But just turn the key off. So I just went and dug around in my old bits and pieces. Now, while I was in my 20s and early 30s, I had a mechanical repair business, services, tune-ups, all sorts of repairs. A lot of leftover stuff still kicking around, so I just went and dug through the any old spark plug pile. Found one. This one's a Motorcraft, but I'm not real worried about that. It's a hotter plug, so that's actually a bit better. So what the difference is, look how far that centre electrode pokes up. The original one in it, sitting right down inside it, this one pokes up a little bit more. Now how it works is you've got the ceramic insulator coming up either side of that electrode inside, and it comes back into the metal body and does a little bit of a U-turn, and then it's crimped into the metal body. However far that electrode is, the further out it pokes, the hotter the heat range on the plug. The further you pull it back in there, the colder, because the heat transfers quicker through the shorter distance than what it will over the longer distance. So this isn't going to matter. The fact it's a motorcraft doesn't even matter. It's just a brand name, even though it is Ford. The other thing you've got to be a bit wary of with these old conventional ignition cars is, and it's getting harder to find, so keep your eyes open when you're buying tune-up parts, spark plugs with an R in the number. If it's got, say this one's an AV6CU, that's a pretty good number, but if it was an AVR, it would mean there's a resistor in there, and it's made specifically for high energy ignitions. So inversely, if you've got an engine like this, or a V8 or whatever, and you put a high energy ignition in it, convert them to a resistor plug. All works together. But it's getting to the point now, if you don't ask, you will get given a resistor plug at the parts places, and they will foul on conventional ignitions. Now, these are always a bit tricky to get the plug started, but I like to just spin them by the end before I put the plug socket in there. And being a magnesium alloy, these are pretty easy to cross thread and muck the thread up in there. Years ago when I had my shop in town, little girl drove her Volkswagen down from Perth and the fan belt came off it. And light came on in the dash, so she decided I better get to where I want to go before the engine stops. So she kept pedalling on. But the sad thing is, on the back of the generator, which is here, there's a whopping great big fan in there that keeps the engine cool. And anyway, I got the call that the car had stopped and could I go and have a look at it. So I go out there and the cylinder heads had melted on it. That's how hot it got. It was probably a couple of jumps short of catching on fire and being a massive great fireball, because a V-dub motor burning is a very spectacular thing.
And not in a good way.
Oh, there's a fireball. They've got so much magnesium in them. Like we've all seen magnesium ribbon burning when we're at school. And it burns just like that, the whole engine. And the gearbox. Years ago, old mate just down the road, his kids were at school with me, I was friends with his kids. He was a Volkswagen guy, drove a V-dub, had a lot of dead ones in the yard, and had a bit of a bushfire run through there one day. And he had, this is an interesting thing that people used to build with these, they'd turn them into air compressors. So you'd blank the intake manifold off, pull two of your plug leads out, and you'd run one side of the engine as the engine, powered by the carburetor and distributor and things like that, and the other side you could change the valving in there. You could buy a camshaft to do it that turned this into an air compressor, and the air came out through the spark plug holes, and you just put a little air cleaner on the air intake pipe on the other side there. So he had this air compressor which had been made into a little trailer. It had the Volkswagen gearbox on it, and Robbie Teal being into all sorts of things like that, it was a pretty cool thing. I like that. Anyway, the bushfire came through and the V-dub burnt, and I remember being up there a couple of days later, and there's the crank and the rods, all the gears out of the gearbox, the axles, the hubs all just sitting there on the ground, and there's just nothing else left. The casing for the generator was laying there, and the starter motor was just laying there in the dirt, well, the casing off it, and that's what happened to it. The whole thing burnt like a piece of magnesium ribbon. Righto, what happened to me key? Hopefully there's a bit of a tune-up, bring it to life. That one's running. One's dead over here. We've picked one cylinder up, so we've got the same problem over here. So this one hole over here is dead. Now V8s with extractors and 6 cylinders with extractors, little bit spit on your finger, just tap each pipe if you've got a miss in there. You'll pick up the one that's cold pretty quick. Bloke was telling me a story years ago about the first Volkswagen he encountered. Yeah, older bloke. Volkswagens turned up a few years after the Second World War in Australia, so we didn't get any of the really early ones. And anyway, Old mate was actually here, of all places, not on the farm, but just in this area. He was across the road, there with a friend of his, and they heard this noise. What on earth is that noise? And we've got a road that runs sort of across through here. It comes to a T road and then it doglegs across. Anyway, they watching, and it was winter time, and there was a bit of water around the place, and they spot this funny little car making a weird ass noise, and the bloke comes up and realises there's a T road in front of him, and he locks the wheels up on the thing, and she just kept sailing straight through, bowled off the barrier sign on the end of the road and wound up in the paddock across over there and just sort of floated across the water. And he said wouldn't drive out because the wheels just kept spinning, so the three of them, the guy who owned the car and the two of them, wound up pushing it back onto the road, and it was the first VW he'd ever seen. Now coincidentally, the guy who told me the story was with his best mate from down Margaret River way, and his best mate was the dad of the guy that's involved with me with the goss. So it's a small world. Right, what have we got here with this one? Yeah, that one's looking a bit oily. That's not running. See, she's just grimy. So I'd say it's the fact that it's been a paddock car and it's just been chugging around that's oiled the plug up. The plug's probably still alright, just wants cleaning, get the oil and grime off, because what's actually happening is with the carbon and rubbish on there, the spark is just actually, instead of jumping, it's just leaking down past the insulator and shorted out. So we'll go and see if we can find another motorcraft, see if we can screw that in the hole and see if she'll go better.
Then it will be much more better.
Oh yeah.
How many cylinders does the bug have?
4.
How many spark plugs have you brought?
1. Let's just do it one at a time. We wouldn't want to rush into it. I found a Bosch. Now, what's more at home in a Volkswagen than a Bosch? This one's hotter again, even better. Now, mixing and matching plugs, you do have to be a little bit careful. I have come across engines where the piston will connect with the outer electrode and close the gap up, and they don't like that. Just be a little bit wary of that. The other thing is, naturally, the reach is important. Don't take out a plug this long and put one this long in the thread, because it's just going to poke right down inside the cylinder and then it's going to carbon up on the thread. You won't be able to get them out. Have seen that. Come across cars like that. I've even employed people who have taken a spark plug out of an engine that's the right plug and gone to the stock and grabbed a spark plug out of the stock supply and screwed the wrong spark plug into the engine. So, and not just by a little bit, by a lot. And so things like this happen, people. This plug I can't actually physically get my hand in there to start, so I'm just going to start it with the socket. Be a little bit wary about it as we do. But it's screwing in nice. I was kind of hoping it'd want to drive out of here.
Might need a different fuel supply then.
Ah, you sure? Could sit it on the roof, it'd be gravity. Just tie it on the back here, use a hook around that, ratchet strap around that bit, that'll work.
Dodgy Dog Productions.
That's it. Don't ever forget it.
Now I know where the name comes from.
Yep, dodgy dogs. Yeah, V-dubs have got their own firing order. They fire 1432, which is a little bit unusual for a 4-cylinder, but it's a little bit unusual car, so to be expected. This spark plug socket gets stuck on. Somebody has not broken the insulator out inside. They have a rubber cushion thing inside them so you don't break the plugs, but I usually find it's pretty good for breaking plugs, and it gets them stuck on the plug. It's also to stop the plug falling out of the socket when you're trying to manoeuvre it in somewhere. You might need a pair of pliers. When services and tune-ups were part of my life, I'd always pull the insulator out and not worry about it. Don't know if I'm going to get that pair in there. Got him. So yeah, there's a rubber insert just in there that the insulator and the plug will hook into, but if you wobble the socket while you're screwing it in there, you'll break the socket off. Alright, I guess given that this has been played with, and my kids have had plays on this and learned a few things from, we better just check that we've got a firing order. Nah, we won't worry. We'll just hope it comes to life. It's always more fun that way. Okay, baby. Better. I still think we've got a dead hole somewhere. We must have been running on one cylinder before. Yeah. I think it's necessary. I think it's necessary, you know.
What? Check the last one?
Yeah, might check the last one. That one's pretty cool. Where's the last pipe on this side? Yeah, that one's pretty cool too. So. If we had something that was running on, oh no, this end's hot here. That one's a little bit hot. Maybe just run it for a little while. Might come to life, you know. Bit of love. Yeah, it's not running on that front one there. It wasn't running on much. Boxies are good, you know, they don't take much to keep them going.
Well, why did they ever go out of fashion then?
People didn't understand them was the trouble. Like I say, I do like the old bug. I do have a soft spot. Oh, hang on. This one's not even plugged on. That might help.
Was that you?
No, that wasn't me. It just wasn't plugged on. We'll plug him on, see what happens. Righto. That's better. That sounds like a bug.
Sounds meaty, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. She'll move.
Where's your fuel?
Just there.
Yeah, but where are you going to put it?
What do you mean? I'm not going to move. I won't move far. Got the slow return throttle.
Stop! That far at the front from hitting the...
It moves. Don't have anywhere good. Camera lady.
Yes!
Can you carry my fuel bottle for
I'll
me?
carry your fuel bottle. You going backwards?
Yeah, I'm going backwards.
So, new job. Fuel deliverer.
How brave are we? What do you reckon we tip a bit of fuel in the tank and see if she drives somewhere?
Righto. Oh, that didn't sound real good.
Well, the tyres are only really flat on the bottom, so I'm guessing that might work. Let's just see what it'll do. Okay. Let's see what she'll do. We're a bit light on for a tiller, so we might have to look at that. We might throw the... No, we won't. Too involved to put the air cleaner on it. We'll see what she does with a bit of fuel in it.
Why is it too involved to put the air cleaner on?
Because the key's behind it, where I'm hooking the power on, sits behind the air cleaner. Now we wound up with our little Volkswagen project when it was happening with a 68 model. This one's I think it's a 66, I'm not sure. Could be a 67, 65, yeah, you know. They all kind of look the same here in Australia. We didn't get the evolution that other countries around the world had. They sort of built the 63 bug all the way through the end of 67. We still had 6-volt push button door handles, the smaller windows, all that sort of stuff in ours. And then 68 they brought out the new shape. Now the car we bought to build a Herbie replica out was the rebound car. The first car I found that I was just in love with was a 66. It had never been licensed. It had been in a shed since the early 70s, and when it was brand new in 1966 it did compete at Bathurst. What better car to make Herbie out of? Unfortunately I rang the bloke and he says, oh, there's another guy trying to beat me down on the price. And I said, forget about him, mate, I'll give you your money you want today. Come and get it today. It was in Perth, 2.5 hours drive away. Look mate, I've got a trailer, I'll just go and hook it on the car and we'll be up there. Oh, in fairness, I should let this other bloke have first knock at it, seeing as he's already contacted me. Well, the other bloke bought it once he had a bit of pressure on him. So then I bought the 68 as the rebound. So to make Herbie, I've had to de-facelift it. So that's where this one's come in, to make a 68 look like a 64 bug or 63 bug. We need a steering wheel. Yeah. Hopefully, a bit of a tiller in here, we'll be able to do something with it. How's that going to work? Yeah, I think we can manage with that. We might have the deluxe, eh? We could call it handlebars then. I reckon, you know, that might just about work. So hopefully she'll suck a bit of fuel through, because in the grand scheme of things, 10, 11 years ago wasn't really that long ago, so it should all work, you'd hope. Steering doesn't like me for some reason. That should be steering. Oh, let's try a bit more.
Wouldn't be the kike in there, would it?
Oh, maybe. It just seems to be solid, doesn't want to work. Doesn't want to go. Looks like we've lost our start wire too. I think this stuff would be more reliable.
Well, it goes.
Sounds like it's got fuel blockage. We're not getting the fuel through from the front. Oh, it was worth a try. We've got it to go. We've got it to drive a bit. We'll have to hang around for a little bit and make sure she doesn't start a fire here with the hot exhaust in the grass, but we'll do that. And then we might go and have a bite of lunch, and I'll give you a quick look at the other one that's hiding in the back of the shed that this was sort of all part of. So we'll see you in a bit, guys. Pretty common thing for Rob's shed. I've got a Volkswagen shelf. Everything turns into a shelf that's a sort of a sideline project for a while. So we've got a little Herbie replica. Now, like anyone else who wants to sort of build a Herbie replica, we want the number plate. So if you're a keen follower of Disney, it's OFP 857. Someone in Western Australia's already got that. So it took me a while to think of something that was appropriate to go on a ridiculous little air-cooled German car. So I came up with this. I was pretty proud of that. It just came to me one night while I was in bed and I thought, wow, that's the plate. It was available. This car is currently registered, so the plate belongs to the car. Really would like to see it driving around with the plate on it. That'd be super cool. So what we've doing till it sort of got sidelined, I'm actually hoping that young Dean will get enthused again and we can have another crack at it. We've got all the dash out of the car outside in it. A bit hard to see in there, but I put the earlier style dash in it. I've got the earlier style guards all the way around, but I can't leave things alone. So I put 50mm in them and pumped them out a bit. We've got a 2.5-inch lowering kit on the front with the wide 5-bolt pattern on disc brakes. That's kind of cool. We've gone back to the earlier front lid. So that's just tucked in there. So I bought a reproduction panel there to put the earlier style front on there. That's all welded in there. Now, typical for most V-dubs, it's had a good smack in the nose and a good smack in the bum. So it's a heap of cars in this. The spare wheel well, I just bought a second-hand front cut from someone that was breaking one up in Perth, and so that's out of a 67, I think. What I do like about the 68 car is it's got burst-proof door latches. It's got a fuel filler door on the outside of the car instead of still having it in the luggage compartment, and it's got a collapsible steering column, so all those features are pretty good. We'll go to 4-wheel disc brakes, a Subaru 5-speed in it, and yeah, it'll have a better Beetle motor in it. There's a lot of combinations out there now. Bit of sectioning gone on with this door. I'll see if I can uncover it a bit so you can see it. Alright, so I found the crossover door handle that would work a 68 door latch, and it was the push button one to match Herbie. So I've got those, and could be a 65 North American, I'm not sure. There's just 1 year that it all lined up, the forces were there. So I've got the piece of door handle section for the push button door handle instead of the pistol grips. And with these later cars, the glass runs on an angle. So as it winds down, it runs further forward in the door and it opens up a gap here for ventilation. Never been a big fan of it. I've driven a lot of bugs and you crack the window a bit like this and you get a cold draft blowing in on your arm. So true to Herbie, I've made a custom quarter vent window that fits in here. I've put pieces of the earlier door and made the pillar a little bit thicker, and the window glass will just wind straight up and down like the earlier car did. And we've sacrificed a little bit of size for the window here because part of their selling feature of the later cars was they narrowed up all these areas around the door to get bigger glass in there to improve the visibility. But the little bit we've lost there, I don't think it makes a whole lot of difference for that. It's got a Superbug roof on it, and it's got the Superbug back window in it with the big glass. Once again, just makes it easier to see out of. When I widened the guards, it shifted them out and it dropped them down against the centre part of the car. So I looked at that, and I think this is about 50mm lower, 60mm lower than what it used to be. So I'll have to build a custom exhaust to drop that down, but we'll probably wind up filling these and smoothing them and putting the exhaust pipe out the side. So it's got the earlier engine cover on it to match the whole Herbie thing. I don't want to run a back bumper on it. I just want to have it super smooth and nice up the back and the slopey back, and that was part of lowering this down as well, so it could actually have a little bit of rake to it when it drives. So one of those things. But when you're doing father and son projects and the son loses interest in it, well, dad loses interest in it too, but it's not for sale. We will get back to it. I really want to see this one on the road because I think it'll be just a great little fun car. It's also got, you're not going to see it. I'll grab a light. Stay there, guys. Stay there. I'll be right back. All right. Let's have a bit of a sticky in here, guys. What I wound up doing was cutting up a Type 3 and getting the independent suspension out of it for the back. So it's sitting on Type 3 independent suspension. At the time, I couldn't find the appropriate car to get the floor pan out of to give it independent in the back rather than the swing axles. So the mounting points in the centre there were cut out of the Type 3 and all lined up there like that. And yeah, it's a pretty straightforward conversion apart from that. Just sort of chop those bits out, sandwich them in there, glue them back together and fit it all up and you've got independent suspension. So thanks guys for watching. We'll be back with some more in the future. We'll try and sort of keep a bit of workshopy sort of tips and things going and a few will it start spread in amongst it to sort of give it a variety to the channel. A few people have been in touch with wanting some information about doing the Stromberg carbies on the Holdens. They're also used on Falcons, so yeah, we'll grab a kit for one of those. We'll grab an appropriate Holden and we'll just give it a birthday and put a kit through the carby and you can share with that. So that's coming up. Thank you so much for everybody who has subscribed. I love your comments. Keep them coming. Stay safe, people. We'll catch you next time.